Hello and welcome again to On Point, sponsored and presented by Sutherland Institute. I'm Holly Richardson. I write a blog called Holly on the Hill and have been involved in Utah politics for over a decade. I'm joined by Michelle Mumford, who is the admissions dean at the BYU Law School, and by Brooke Adams, a Tribune reporter. So we've joked a little bit before we started that you are the liberal media. but you know, actually the fun thing that we've been doing with this show, and this is our fourth show, we are trying to talk to women, just women, and we may have a male guest from time to time, we haven't yet, but to women who are involved in looking at politics in Utah. So whether it's people in elected office, we also had Tracy Gunderson come in, who had been in the Department of Commerce and is now working with Draper City. I mean, all those different types of things. So you bring a unique perspective from your beat as a reporter for the Tribune. Do you want to talk to us about that a little bit?
Sure. I cover federal court for the Tribune. I've done that for about a year and a half perhaps now. I also cover corrections. So I jumped into the fire on that one, and that's a beat I begged for actually at the newspaper. I was quite interested in corrections and judicial, or prison reform and recidivism and issues like that. I'm particularly interested in what's happening with women in the prison here. So I begged for that beat, and boy, the prison relocation happened to bubble right up.
Yeah, I just actually left the House Majority Caucus, and they were talking actually about Prada, the different kind of Prada.
Yes.
Right. So Representative Hutchings had a funny story about going off-site to look at what some other prisons had done in other states, and so they had this big sign that they were holding to welcome them, and it says Prada on it. He said all the women are like, oh, and then there's this bunch of white guys that get off the plane. And they're like, what?
That's really funny.
So the prison relocation, what's the A?
What's the what?
P-R-A.
Oh, Prison Relocation and Development Authority. Yeah.
Okay, so can you tell us a little bit then about what's going on with that, or with women in corrections, or both?
Yeah, how likely is a women's prison in that discussion?
Well, actually, I haven't had a chance to read through the whole. We've just received the preliminary report from the consultant, Prada 2.0, as I like to call it, hired to help them figure this out. And I did notice that they do recommend that there be a new women's facility built, just catering to women. So in a lot of other states, states are doing many different things to deal with the female prisoner population. Ours is growing consistently this year. They've been at maximum capacity, which is a problem. And
are they just separate part of the prison?
They have their own little wing, you might call it, the Timpanogos facility out there at the point of the mountain. It's one of the newer facilities, but it's not set up in a way that can sort of facilitate the needs of women. For example, what I notice other states do, they do a lot more to bring, most women out there have children. There's not a good way to facilitate helping these women be better mothers, which we need them to do when they go back out. So that's one issue. Yeah. So we just got this report. It's 200 pages plus long. They gave a 3-page executive summary and a little PowerPoint handout, so we're just still trying to figure out the numbers and what they're talking about.
Tell me about some of the issues that you cover with corrections that affect not only women, but as we talk about prison beds, the number of beds, the cost to the community, those types of things. I understand Utah has fewer people going to prison, but more people going back to prison. Right. That those are some of the things that we look at. We're not potentially doing a very good job of training them to, then function in society when they leave. I mean, is that what you're seeing and hearing?
And so, there's a lot of data showing that our recidivism rate, and that's somebody who's out on parole or probation, they are not succeeding and they're going back. And we have more people going to prison right now because of recidivism, failing probation or parole, than we do going in for new crimes. And so, we need to do something, it appears to me, better to help make them succeed. And the corrections system is trying to do some things. They built that halfway back facility, the Fortitude Center, just opened in the last year. And the idea there is somebody who's getting into trouble with their probation and their parole, rather than sending them right back to prison, we can put them there and try to help them get back on track.
Rehabilitate a little closer.
Yeah, and you know, it's just really hard. I started to follow a woman who left prison. I met her the day she came out and sort of tracked around with her to see what she experienced. And some of the, you know, and I just have had an experience too dealing with a man who got out after spending 16 years in prison. And trying to put their lives back on track is really difficult. Just getting an ID when you've been away and maybe your birth certificate and driver's license and all of that has gotten lost in the shuffle is one huge problem. And there was in the legislature a bill to sort of fix that and give people a state-issued ID card, but that has some problems and isn't working well, and I think they've got to go back and fix that. So that's one issue.
Yeah, you know, and that's an interesting issue, and I'm sure you see it in a law school, right, from a different perspective, is how the legal community then deals with the crimes as they're committed and or prosecuted. And then from a legislative perspective, I mean, one of the things that was brought up just recently is how many new felonies Utah has compared to even like a decade ago, that we're adding new felonies every single year. And is that actually something that's a positive, or is that a negative? I mean, when you make it a felony, in fact, this is the example I heard recently, it's a felony to drive your ATV across a plowed field. Well, is that something that has to be a felony, right? And is that something where the government needs to step in and say no? And I mean, it's those parts of the conversation. And then when you have moms, for example, like you just mentioned, who are imprisoned or incarcerated, but don't have the skills while they're there to get out and change things, right? They don't have the ability to get ID cards or take care of their kids or get them in school or all of those things. I mean, it's things we almost take for granted a lot of times. I can't imagine 16 years. So I'm trying to think back 16 years ago. It was way before cell phones, right? I mean, how much things change even in location and how you interact with society, how you even apply for a job anymore, right, is very different than it was 16 years ago.
Yeah, it's really tough for these people. And you know, one thing, if you've finished your sentence, you've terminated, you're not eligible really for any help, right? If you come out on probation or parole, or you're on probation, you're not going in. But if you come out on parole, you are eligible for some help. You know, you get a probation officer or parole officer to guide you and helps you. And there's really stiff requirements. You have to stay employed. That's pretty hard with the record and with the economy the way it's been. You have to have a place to live. That's pretty hard if you've been estranged from your family and, you know, cut off all support out there for yourself, and then you don't have a job, you don't have money. It's tough. And so I think there's a lot. That was one of the issues yesterday when they approved this preliminary plan and recommended to tell the lawmakers, we think the prison should move, need a new facility. It'll allow us to do a lot of these new cutting-edge approaches to dealing and rehabilitating people. But a big part of it, and Salt Lake County Mayor Ben McAdams voted against it because he wants to hear more up front about what we're going to do to help people get back on their feet and not go back to prison.
Right. And it's only partial. I mean, when you just said that if you come out on parole, there's assistance, but if you finish your sentence, then there's not assistance. I mean, that's wrong, right? To just say, okay, good luck, bye, see you later, right? And that's, I mean, those are the types of issues
with the scarlet letter on
the scarlet letter,
it is
right?
What it is.
Right, and yeah, those are issues. So,
well, and the sentencing guidelines in general, you know, major reforms is needed there, and especially as relating to drug charges and just the inconsistencies and the inconsistencies also with what it's matching up against, you know, the degree of sentence for the degree of crime.
Right.
I know Senator Lima is looking at that.
Right, and addressing some of those issues.
There's a big effort coming from the federal government down, which I think will spread to the state to take a look and reform some of our sentencing.
Yeah. Well, I think it was Malcolm Gladwell in one of his books, I think it was The Tipping Point, where he actually talked about the unintended consequences of three strikes, of the three strikes law in California and what that did. And that's one of the issues, right, is you look at one situation and say, okay, well, here's the perfect solution for that, except that it ripples then, and you have multiple offenders, so you've got somebody in now for life because they have three strikes, but they didn't murder somebody who gets in and goes out. They stole a baseball or whatever it
Right,
is, but
right.
because it's their third offense. I mean, there's some real issues that
Right.
that are serious issues that need to be addressed for
Need
sure.
reform.
It's one of the sausage making things, right? Is you try some things, well, that didn't work very well. What can we try again? And what's the proper role of government? How do you fit people in the right way? So I know that you have a passionate issue you want to talk about today.
I'm
So-
fired up. And I know you have a lot of experience with Amendment 3 background-wise, and you can't offer opinion, but I can.
Okay.
Do you want to
You
give
can
some
offer
of your
background.
background? Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
well, okay, so I'm covering the Amendment
federal,
3.
yeah.
I cover federal court, so I'm covering this issue. And maybe I'll share one little thing. We were expecting this decision from Judge Shelby to come out the first week of January or so. And I can tell you, I was sitting in the office and got wind of this, and you're kidding me. And so it's just been a roller coaster since then because it was sort of unexpected and came out so
It was,
quickly.
come on, the Friday afternoon before Christmas.
Right.
It's like 3 o'clock or 1:30, 2 o'clock in the
yeah.
afternoon. I'm starting to see stuff on Twitter. I'm like, no way, that can't be true.
I felt so bad for Mayor McAdams. They start calling him down. I'm like, this is the week
I know.
school just got out. Christmas is starting. He has like 4 young kids. He's it probably wasn't on his schedule.
Yeah.
But yes, I am fired up. I think we have had 3 unforced errors in the whole, to make kind of a sports analogy, in the Amendment 3 and the non-discrimination bills. The whole subject matter. The first being the email from Gene Scher that he sent, to his law firm explaining that he was leaving for religious reasons. Perfectly fine, that there's nothing wrong with the reasons why he took the case, but kind of just from a PR standpoint, it was an unforced error. It gave a headline. That's what we should always be thinking of. What's the headline going to say?
Speaking to the reporter.
Obviously the headline here said he's doing it for religion. It was just an unforced error. Second unforced error I really think has happened recently about SB 100.
Yeah.
Not even considering it because of some sort of animus. And Judge Shelby had animus in his opinion. It was one of the prongs. He didn't find it.
Explain that for non-attorneys like me.
So animus is, and there's some kind of, there's a little Supreme Court precedent cases out there that say animus, hatred, a bad feeling towards
Picking on a minority
a minority,
because you don't like them.
Right. If that's the reasoning behind certain legislation, then it's suspect and is higher is subject to higher scrutiny. And but Judge Shelby found that there was no animus here, and he couldn't find it. And so now the reasoning of not picking up SB 100 or any of the bills, both for or against, kind of, one would on one side, is that we might find animus, and then Senator Urquhart says, well, it might be good because it might show that we don't have animus. None of that is relevant to the case.
Right.
None of it can go in the record.
Right.
The court would never, the 10th Circuit would never say, oh, but look what Utah just did last week. It's just not relevant. And so as a PR move, I think it gave us another bad headline for the AG's office to go in and say, well, we have this case, and so you guys shouldn't do anything. I just think it was a bad headline. I don't think it was worth the cost. And then I'm upset, really, about, okay, listen to what you see as a commonality. This is the state's brief. It was handed down a couple days ago. It's well written, well researched, obviously. See what the commonality is of the attorneys on our case, on our state's team. John, Monty, Jean, Brian, and Parker. There are no women.
There are no women.
Are there no women in the state involved in these policy discussions at this top high level? We had the governor's State of the State pictures on Facebook about, 8 people around a table talking about what we're going to talk about, all men.
Right.
Are there no women involved at this level?
There were until Ali Isom resigned, and now she's got a different
Well,
position,
I know the governor has the general counsel is J.C. Skinner, a BYU Law alum, a woman, but she wasn't around, how involved is she? I hope
I hope she's involved. But in this case, you know, when Utah is putting forth their opinion of what marriage should be like between a man and a woman should be part of the conversation, should be at council table, because there are a ton of women at the other council table, and there are a ton of women in the clerk's positions in the judges' chambers, you know, and so to have I just think it's an unforced error. I think these are PR moves that we can think stronger about, and I'm just
So just tell us how you really feel.
I'm upset. I'm upset. I think we have women in the state that are credible and quality and should be more involved, and without having to run for office.
Right.
You know, the chamber,
absolutely. There's
this
lots of
funnel
ways
to the
to be
governor's
involved.
office.
Yeah.
How many women are in the chamber?
Yeah, very few. We talked about that. Natalie Gochner has been there, and yet she's about the only one, and she's mostly transitioned out of that role now at the chamber.
I don't know what the makeup of the AG's office is actually, as far as staff. You know, how many women? I know a few names up there.
Yeah.
Our
Carol
Solicitor
Verdoya.
General.
Yeah. Who?
The Solicitor General's
Bridget?
name, yes, Bridget Johnson.
Okay.
You don't know.
I don't. Yeah. See, I don't know. I'm not familiar. I tend to, you know.
She's not on the brief.
On that point, I'll say, as somebody who covers federal court, when I go to federal court, I'm really struck by how few women are there.
Yes.
On any case,
Right.
you know, there's very few women. I one time counted it was on a land use issue, and I was struck by how many attorneys were in the room. There were probably 25 attorneys, and I think there were 1 or 2 women. So, yeah.
Yeah, and you know, I think that's one of the things as we talk about it. You know, I come from a conservative perspective. I'm a mom. I've got a large family, and yet I'm very involved in my community. I recently was awarded the Silver Beaver from the Boy Scouts of America because I've been involved in scouting and the community. I've been involved in talking to schools. I mean, there's so many ways to be involved. You don't have to run for office. You don't have to win elected office to be able to be involved and make a difference in the community. But I just did a presentation today to the State Chamber of Commerce, and I said to them, and many people are politically active, but I said, you may not take an interest in politics, but it takes an interest in you. And whether that is law or, you know, journalism or you know, political legislation, whatever it is, business,
economics,
all of those, it affects our families every day. And as women in the community, when we go home and we say, I don't have to worry about what the courts are doing, I don't have to worry about what law is doing, I don't have to worry about legislation or business or anything, because I just focus on my family, that's great, but all those other things do affect your family.
Right.
Right? It affects what you pay at the grocery
And
store.
it might not turn out okay.
That's right. Right, and I know that there's sometimes this feeling of just don't rock the boat. You know, don't stick your head up. You might get it shot at, and
Or I
that
don't
is
have
true,
time.
right?
Well, yes, definitely.
And that I might not have time. That's true, but you make the time.
Right. I in my run for AG, I was, let's see, an ASB candidate, a not serious candidate. You know,
What's
all
an
those
ASB candidate?
student body.
Oh,
Student
Really?
body. What's the other word? US. I forget the Utah term for. Yeah. Yes.
Never heard of that.
Yeah, and I set myself up
were
for
you a
it.
token?
Yes.
A novelty.
Well, and I was the wife.
You know, we
for the
talk
first week,
about
I was the wife
the
of.
representation of women a lot at the paper. It's something we're trying to be sensitive to, like, you know, showing them in our stories, having them in weighty positions at the paper. And yet we fail too. Sometimes we recently started a blog, and it was being authored by 7 men. There wasn't a single woman. And we said, wait a minute, you know, don't you need a woman in here somewhere, because we're looking at different things on
Right.
the internet and in the public space. And so they fixed that, but, you know, I think it's pervasive.
Well, and that's, you know, I think that's one of the things that I hope to see coming from this type of conversation that we have with On Point, is that we can talk about some of these bigger issues. People can listen as they're driving in, you know, to work, or they're taking their kids to in carpools to school, all of those types of things, because there's so many ways to be involved. You do not have to devote full time to this. You can be a full-time mom and still be involved in your community, right? And it's important. And you don't have to follow every single issue. In fact, it's impossible, right? But you can pick one, whether it's, you know, taxing authority for your local school board, because, or your local school district. Do you know they can raise your taxes?
Yeah.
And do you know that they do regularly?
And they did.
Right?
Salt Lake did.
So did mine, Alpine School District, right?
Yeah.
And how many people didn't know? They didn't even know.
Until after.
And some of them, I think a lot of them still don't
Still
know,
don't.
right? That they didn't know that their taxes can be and are often raised by different taxing entities. And you think it only comes from the capital, and it doesn't. It comes from multiple other places, right? Or
Right.
you can go to city council and say, look, I'm passionate about a library. What can I do to help make that happen for my area or my community or whatever that is?
You know, I'm not a member of this group, but I will make an observation that during the whole prison debate the past year with this Prada 2.0, the League of Women Voters was there. And they had 4 or 5 women usually sitting in, following this and doing their own. I was pretty impressed by that. And what also struck me is the diversity of ages. Because a lot of those groups like that, I think, I'm not sure young people find them relevant or appealing to be involved in. But this had a number of young college-age women who were involved working with the older women who've been, you know, sort of the stalwarts of keeping tabs on the lawmakers. And I thought that was pretty impressive, frankly.
And the Real Women Run, or you know, through
Yeah.
the Hinckley Institute, they're doing a good job bringing.
Right. And yeah, of both mentoring and providing, you know, opportunity and information. Yeah.
Can I go back to your point on
Yes.
this? So on Amendment 3, when it was at the district court level, there was a woman attorney involved, Darcy Goddard, who I think was Salt Lake County, and that's because Sherry Swenson was a
That's right. She
named-
still is a party.
a named defendant. It's a little unclear, actually. That's interesting they put her there because I'm not sure she was named in the appeal, actually, what her role is.
Oh, she might not be in it, but they're just using
Yeah,
the title
from the original
district court,
case.
the caption. Right.
Right. So
But this is going to be fascinating, and what a great, you know, opportunity for Utah to lead out and, you know, on the issue, making sure that we're sensitive to, you know, everything that all facets of the discussion. And
You mentioned Steve Urquhart's bill, the anti-discrimination bill.
Yes.
And I think the very first meeting we had, or the very first conversation we had on Point was, we had talked about that a little bit. And I said then that I thought the conversation, because of the Judge Shelby decision, would kill that bill. And it did. It's
Right.
dead.
Right.
Right? They voted yesterday in the Senate. They're not even going to hear it
Right.
in a closed caucus. And I think there was the perception of overlap that was probably not accurate, but the perception is there that it's the same thing, and it's not. I mean, I really do believe his bill would have passed had Judge Shelby not issued his decision right before the legislative session started. I really do think it would have, because people
What do
were
you
talking
think-
about that and they were comfortable with that, and now all of a sudden it's lumped in with Amendment 3. And
do you
they're-
think before December 20 and Judge Shelby's, what was the difference between this bill, same bill last year, Ben McAdams? Was it just a Republican senator finally
Yep.
brought it?
Yeah.
yeah.
I think that's one of the big reasons is when you have the majority party, and we have a supermajority as Republicans in the state, when you have people from that party stepping up and saying, this is how we do it so that we still maintain, you know, our religious values and all of those things,
Right.
It's somehow a stick that Republicans use if it's a Democratic idea in
Right.
Utah,
Right.
and it's vice versa in
Right.
other places. But I think because Senator Urquhart is Republican and he was willing to say, look, this is an issue that we need to deal with because we want to be kind and friendly and all of those things, right? We don't advocate bigotry or anything like that. That I thought his bill actually had a decent chance of passing.
Right.
And then as soon as the decision came out, it was over.
So if they would have decided to hear it, you think it would have failed because of
It would have failed, yeah. Yeah, I think there's no question.
Do you think
at
the
this
PR
point.
from that would have been worse than the PR from this?
I do.
So perhaps it was a
I do, and you know, everything, it's always a balancing act, right, of trying to decide, and it's always a level of choice that you're making. So, for example, in a political race, it's not only important to go out and vote, it's important to make sure you have quality candidates that you can vote for. Because there are many races where you kind of look at the candidate pool and go, I don't really have strong opinions on any of them because none of them really stand out as somebody who could be a leader, or, I mean, and some people do have strong opinions, but that's part of being politically involved. It's not just showing up at the voting booth in
Right.
November every year.
Right.
It's being engaged enough to know who's running, why are they running.
Which is usually what happens when someone decides to jump in.
Sure.
They look at
They
the
look
field
at it and they say,
they're
oh my, I could do a better job.
Right.
Right?
I want to go back to what you just said. You think it would fail, and I will share. The Tribune, we did this poll to see what support there was out there in the public for the non-discrimination bill, and what the poll showed was a majority across all spectrums,
Right.
Democrat, Republican,
Right.
Mormon, non-Mormon, age groups, all
Right.
supported that bill, or a change like that.
Right.
And so, why just because
Was
of
that
the
poll before December 19th?
after?
December 20? It was after.
It was after.
I really do think it's because of the PR, right? I think it's because of the optics of how it looks, that it's so, it seems to be closely tied to the gay marriage argument, which there's really quite a bit of separation, but it's sometimes hard to see that separation. And I just think in Utah, we're heavily Republican and heavily LDS, especially in some areas. Down in Utah County where I live, heavily LDS, less so in Salt Lake County. But I think with those factors, I think it was just, it was the Judge Shelby decision killed Steve Urquhart's bill. And it wasn't the Senate caucus, and the poll, it doesn't matter, frankly. I just think it would have been DOA. I just don't think it would have gotten out of the Senate, and if it made it to the House would have killed it. So I think that's what would have happened with the nature.
I
The
guess that's where we
overall-
need the public to speak up.
That's right,
Right?
right? And that makes a difference, right? That makes a difference. So people do speak up, and they need to contact their legislators and do it in respectful ways. But I would like to transition for the last few minutes just to some of the education funding issues that we're talking about on the state level. So there's a little bit more money in the bucket this year, the education bucket, and there's conversations about how that should be spent. So Speaker Lockhart has a technology initiative that she's very invested in. The governor today said that kind of came out of nowhere. He wasn't expecting to see a push for technology.
She didn't consult with him.
She did not consult with him, apparently. So, and then there's other people that are saying, we can increase the WPU, we can pay more to teachers, we can do all these variety of things. What do you think is going to happen this year with education funding?
Well, education's not my area. I will just make this observation that I think, aren't we still dead last in the nation?
No.
In per pupil spending?
Yeah, we were down there.
Yeah, we're kind of down
It's
there.
low.
We were
40.
But as a
37,
percentage of
Yeah.
our income, we're up there
Right.
quite a bit higher, right? So we
Right.
have larger families, but as a percentage of what we take in, the state's budget is largely spent on education.
So I do think the state needs to, put some more money there, but I don't know where.
Right. In what area? That's the question this year,
Yeah.
right? Is we've got a little bit more. Where's it go? What do you think?
Tech. I like the idea of tech. I'm interested in her proposal. She said she would show us where, where she would fund it from. I think I'm waiting for that. I don't know yet. There's no easy solution. The throwing more money per class the studies show that doesn't ever
Right.
equate. But in some areas, I think it would help.
Here's the really interesting thing to me is our education system is one of the only ones that's still based on a 17th century model. we build a brick and mortar building, we send kids there, we set them in a seat, we teach to them, and then they go home. And then we stop for the summer so that they can go work the fields.
Yeah,
Right?
That's true.
That's one of the areas where we look at it and say
lost
how yeah, that's right.
Online.
How can you look at maximizing retention, right, for the information? And some of the studies out there on education are that whether socioeconomic status, by the end of your educational career in the public school system, if you are an upper level income bracket, then you're going to do better on testing, right? But it's not because you're more intelligent. It's those things that happen at home where the parents teach you how to interact
Right.
and how to be assertive and ask questions.
Right.
It's those summer months where you're engaged in additional learning opportunities that a lot of times kids in lower socioeconomic brackets don't have those opportunities.
The U camps are really expensive.
Right,
For,
exactly,
yes,
right?
For summer, yes.
That's right.
I can't,
And so
I
so
won't
you
do
look
it.
at those types of things and you go, okay, so how can we make things better? So the speaker's proposal is to say, we're digital immigrants, right? We're new to the technology age. I mean, I am a child of the 60s, believe it or not. And when I grew up, we had a little clock on the wall that was a cat with a tail that went like this. We had a phone that was attached to the wall with a cord where you could maybe reach the other side of the room, right? And so now I have grandkids that are, I have a 2-year-old, not even a 2-year-old grandson, he's a 1.5 years old. He knows how to work an iPad. He can get in, he can find his games, and he can play his games.
Right.
Those are digital natives. So isn't it, her perspective is, can we not support these digital natives in a new and different way that's innovative? But it's not just throw money at it, it's
Right.
provide infrastructure for the schools, making sure that they have got, you know, the ability to deliver digital content, that you provide training for the teachers who are also digital immigrants on how to access and best use. It's not, you're not going to go on and play Angry Birds,
Right.
but you're going to go on and learn how to, like I have, you're going to learn how to do math potentially with some of these games.
Right.
So I have a 12-year-old, and she gets on and she is acing her math classes because of the
Because
math
of
games
that.
she plays.
Really? Wow.
Well,
Yeah.
and the Khan Academy is doing great with that and teaching coding to kids
Yeah.
through this. The Clayton Christensen has done a lot
Yes,
of research
disruptive
in this.
innovation
Yes,
stuff,
yeah.
right? So learning to
and
do
the,
things differently.
the successful schools are using this online
Yeah.
self-learning a couple hours a day in these
Right.
these adaptive schools.
Right. Well, my prediction is we're going to see a good chunk of money go towards increased technology, but I don't think it's going to be exactly everything the speaker's proposing. But I think that there's going to be a step in that direction, and additional funding for the WPU, trying to get more money to the teachers who are the front lines in the classroom, and they need the money, right? We need to fund our teachers better.
Yes.
So
Well, that
that's
will be interesting to watch roll out, because in my mind I start thinking about, well, how does that play out given the diversity in schools and economics
Right.
and
Right.
class of people in the state.
Well, and then when
So-
you have, you know, rollouts in places like California where it
Right.
doesn't go so well. It's
well,
hard to
and
compare.
that so far, that's what the speaker has been talking about, is the rollouts. They have looked at the places where it has worked and the places where it has not worked, and they know they're going to take it down to the district level and make it available to the district. This is not a vendor bill. There's no one specific company or group of companies that's going to benefit. It's looking at piece by piece, how do you make those steps and how do you make it work for everyone? And it's not saying you have to have an iPad.
Right.
It's, let's look at, is it an
What
iPad?
might help.
Is it a tablet? Is it a laptop? What's best for your school if you're the school district administrator, and how do you roll those out? So that, and do you start with maybe 5th graders? You do
Right.
5th and 6th grade, and then the next year you do 3rd and 4th grade. You know, do you
Yeah.
roll it out that way? Do you start with K-6? Do you do 7 to 12? I mean, there's a lot of discussion, I think, but I do think that we're going to see, my prediction is we're going to see money put towards technology, a good chunk, and then additional money for the teachers. That's what I think this year.
I
So,
like the conversation.
yeah, the
think it's a good
conversation's
one.
great. So thank you again for joining us, and we're done for the week. We'll see you next week on the Hill.